Let's talk about women. It has been ruled by the Equality and Human Rights Commission that service providers, and that means public bodies and businesses, can indeed ban trans people, trans women from single-sex spaces. We're talking about hospitals, sports clubs, shops, changing rooms, and rape refuges. I wonder if that also will apply to prisons. Let's talk to my next guest. She is the leader of Standing for Women, Kellie-Jay Keane. Good evening, Kellie.
Hello, good evening.
But this was a good day, wasn't it? This was the Daily Mail all across the front, a victory for women's rights. It was a pretty good day, wasn't it?
I guess it was a slightly better day than yesterday, but I don't think it's a particularly victorious day for women. See, this goes back to that trick of language. And if we'd said men all along, then single-sex spaces would have never included men, but we haven't been saying that, and we still can't say that. And the EHRC doesn't seem to also be able to bring itself to say it. The GRA has done a hell of a lot of damage for women's rights, and without recognising or changing people's legal sex, then we wouldn't be in any of this trouble. It's ludicrous.
I noticed on your sweater there you've got that very, very difficult question. What is a woman? Why don't you define that right now, Kellie-Jay?
Well, it's an adult human female, and I feel the fact that I can answer that, I might get a seat in the Supreme Court in the USA.
It is ridiculous. And while we're going on about this being a great day for women's rights, what exactly are we talking about? We're talking about the ability of organisations, either public or private, to say to someone who identifies as a woman, who just says I'm a woman, it's the ability of these organisations to say, I'm sorry, you can't go into that space because that is for biological females. It's as simple as that. So all of a sudden, I don't know, a sports club will have the right to say to someone who's identifying as a woman, you can't go into there because that's for biological females. Anyway, so it seems that we have just come to a point of common sense, but why did we spend so much time away from the world of common sense on this pretty straightforward issue, it seems to me?
Well, there's always cowardice in much of this legislation, and so there's this thing called legitimate aim. So in order to exclude men from women's spaces, you have to have a legitimate aim. I would have thought the fact that they were for women was a legitimate aim. You can't come and play rugby against women is a legitimate aim to stop men because you might actually break their backs, their legs, or kill them. So that would be a legitimate aim. I think women gathering, talking about themselves and their rights and their bodies and their spaces, and we are different to men, I would have thought that was a legitimate aim. How can that not be?
What do you think of this new campaign, Sex Matters? The three women who have launched a campaign that in the weeks coming up to the local elections, they're going to go to every candidate of the main parties and make them define what a woman is. And if they can't give a legitimate answer or an answer that makes sense, they're going to encourage everyone not to vote for them.
Look, I think that I wish them all the luck in the world, but the bigger issue is that most people have no idea what's going on. And so most people think, due to politicians, due to the media not being able to use accurate language, most people think that this is a brand new civil rights, that there's some very vulnerable people, and that women's rights are just sort of in competition, if you like, but not under threat. So I think for me, I think the public need to know what's going on. I personally would like to target IPSO and get them to lift the ridiculous sanctions on anybody that correctly calls a man a man.
It was a bit difficult at one point where a male prisoner identified as female, was transferred to a female prison and went on to rape two of the inmates. and the media had to refer to the rapist as she. So sometimes these rules, I accept that, Kelly, can be quite difficult, but the rules are the rules. But that does bring into play the relevant question. What I would like to know, I don't know what your understanding of the situation is now, is if that happens again, given this new ruling by the Equality and Human Rights Commission, if a male prisoner decides to identify as a female, will she now still be transferred to a women's jail? Because in the past this has happened with disastrous results. Do you think there'll be an end to that?
Well, I'm not sure before this quite feeble announcement by the EHRC that they should have been allowed anyway. I'm not sure there's anywhere in any guidance that would say it's a great idea to put a rapist in a women's prison. So I don't know if this strengthens it, or well, do you know what I mean? It
isn't a great idea, is it? Sorry.
No, I mean, what was sometimes I wonder, what is the conversation? Is the conversation completely omitting the fact that women exist when they talk about putting these rapists and serious criminals into women's prisons? Or, how does that even happen? Oh, we've got John, now Janet, and he has raped 5 people, but we think, he likes to dress as a woman. He identifies as a woman. We're just going to chuck him in with the women. Oh, is that the non-violent women, the majority of which are serving time because they've also been victims of abuse? Yes, those women. I mean, it's ridiculous.
And how did we ever get to a situation? I mean, this has now been addressed and redressed, but how do we get to a situation where rape refuge centres for women who've been raped were not allowed to ban trans women, who hadn't physically transitioned from entering those places? How did we get to that?
Well, look, I think a long time ago, some well-meaning people saw these particular men as incredibly vulnerable. And then what happened is some of those men, for good or bad reason, and I can't think of a good one, decided to work within that sector. And then once those men are working within that sector, for example, the CEO of Edinburgh Right Crisis is a man who got his job not telling anybody that he wasn't a woman. I mean, he now runs it, and one of the conditions of any trauma therapy is to unpick how these women feel about men who call themselves women. Part of their trauma therapy is to be compelled to believe that men can be women. So that's how we get there. We get a lot of well-meaning people, a lot of lazy people, a lot of people who can't actually see the end of their nose as to what the potential harm might be, and just going along with stuff. And then the next minute, we're in a really, really dangerous situation.
See, at this point, of course, we have to go through this ritual where I say, and I do sort of believe this, I don't mind. It's absolutely fine for me that somebody who's transitioned wants to be treated as a woman, wants to be called a woman's name, wants to be addressed with the female pronouns, she and her. Absolutely fine by me. All of that is cool. But there are these difficult areas, aren't there? Like women's prisons, rape refuge centres, and dare I say it, female sport. Now, when this system of kindness towards people who've transitioned infringes on those areas, it seems to me it undermines women's rights. It undermines women's right to compete in sport on a basic level platform. It undermines perhaps the safety of female prisoners in female prisons, and it undermines the safety of rape victim females in rape refuge centres. Do you see what I'm saying?
I totally do. I'm absolutely determined by the end of this year, Kevin, I'm going to convince you of the thin end of the wedge argument when it comes to surrendering any female language for men and where it always is likely to end up.
Well, that is your standpoint, and as you know, I respect it, but I can't go along with it for a number of reasons.
Of course.
But this is the difficult situation we're in. What do we need to do to sort this mess out? Because it is a mess. We have senior politicians like Keir Starmer, and to be fair, Rishi Sunak as well. It's a cross-party problem. They can't go onto the telly or the radio or give an interview, and they won't define what a woman is. Where does this? How can we cure this madness?
It's just going to take some people to stand up and speak up. It's going to take some brave politicians. I always thought some of the Labour women would actually stand up and get a bit feisty, and they really haven't on this issue. We can't forget that Boris is in power, so it is entirely up to the government, really, to be very strong on this. And they have to do it without fear. I mean, maybe the House of Lords is more of a solution, which I never thought I would say as somebody who probably 5 years ago thought it should be abolished. But the fact that they don't have to rely on being elected might be a good thing. Maybe ban all politicians from Twitter so they don't get a really false sense of the real world and how people feel. You know, people that work with their hands and have mortgages to pay and worry about how much their heating bill is going to be over the next couple of months, they do know what a woman is. It's people more in the sort of lofty middle class where they're not going to be harmed by it that seem to pretend that they don't.
Well, listen, I think you and I are both fully in favour of trans rights. I certainly am. As I say, as I always say at this point, as far as I'm concerned, everybody should have the right to live their life in whatever way makes them happy, and good luck to them. However, when that desire infringes on the rights of women, we hit a problem. That's the problem. It's, as I always say to you, Kelly, you often hear women referred to as people with cervixes or people who menstruate. You never hear men referred to as people with testicles. That's sexist.
Yeah, utterly. Although I might start putting that into my lexicon, to be honest.
People with testicles. All right. Well, don't forget to quote me. I gave it to you. Kellie-Jay, always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much. That's Kellie-Jay Keane. She's in charge of the Standing for Women campaigning group.